Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. You'll hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and writers that cover the NFL on a daily basis. The New Orleans Saints podcast starts right now. Here's your host, Erin Summers.
Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. Erin Summers here alongside John DeShazier. The Saints are coming off a 35-14 win over the Cleveland Browns on Sunday. That's 2 in a row under interim head coach Darren Rizzi. JD, how different has these last 2 weeks felt?
Well, it's the difference between winning and losing, especially losing 7 straight. So night and day pretty much. When you have something good to feel about as a team, it makes everything better. I'm sure the mood is a lot lighter in the city because it got pretty gloomy and pretty desolate around, especially when you're talking about the comments about the team and those kinds of things. And look, the team's not exactly out of the woods. They're 4-7, but it makes things a lot easier when you win than when you don't win, especially when a fan base hangs on the results of a team as much as New Orleans hangs on the results of Saints games.
I saw Tyrann Mathieu tweeted something after the game that, he was really happy for the city that we're winning again because, to your point, yes, it feels a little bit different. The Dome was rocking again on Sunday. It's been a lot of fun, and on the field, things have looked a little different as well. I mean, we saw Taysom Hill doing a little bit of everything yesterday. Over 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, 138 rushing yards. I mean, I can't imagine how that man feels today.
Well, Taysom's main thing has always been availability. When he's played, he's been productive. Now, that last touchdown run, the 75-yarder, I mean, Cleveland looked like it waved the white flag and was like, hey, we just want to get out of here. But that said, he still had to make the run. He still had to, I think he might have broken a tackle, but he still had to do the work. And he's been that kind of versatile guy for the Saints when he's been available. That's the biggest thing with Taysom is, can you string together 3, 4, 5 games with him because it makes the offense different. And unfortunately, the sporadic appearances allows defenses to not have to account for him when he's not there. And so yesterday we saw a perfect example of it. Alvin Kamara can be the decoy when Taysom's out there. You have all kinds of different things, little tricks that you can employ with him, whether it's that quarterback or you put him in motion, you put Derek Carr in motion, you put Alvin Kamara in motion. You can do all kinds of things. And so it compensates for the loss of Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed because now you can do some things that, you can give enough eye candy to where defenses still have to be honest because they know there's still a couple of guys out there that can hurt you. But when he's not out there, then you can just zero in on Alvin Kamara and say, okay, everybody else see what you can do. Having Alvin out there along with Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill is capable of having those kinds of games. We've seen him have, 2 or 3 touchdown games where he's just run over people, roughshod. So to see him be able to do it yesterday and to have a bye week coming. So if he does have some bumps and bruises from the touches, he can heal them up and be back and be ready for the Rams game. Yeah,
it was fun to watch all the different ways that the Saints were utilizing him. He was passing, he was catching, he was running, and it was fun to put up some points. I mean, 21 points there in the fourth quarter of action. It was tied 14-14, and then they've been talking a lot about finishing. You outscore the Browns 21-0 in the fourth quarter of action, and you get yourself a nice-looking win. But up until the fourth quarter, it was tied.
Yeah, it was tied. But that was the Saints kind of imposing their will on Cleveland. And so that's how it got to be 21-0 in the fourth quarter, where they were able to get some defensive stops, even though, scoreboard. I mean, if you're just looking at the stats and you see 400-plus yards by the opponent, you say, and no turnovers, you're saying, well, that might not be a good day for the Saints. But they were good situationally. They stopped Cleveland on 10 of 13 third down attempts. They stopped them on a couple of fourth down attempts. Those things add up huge in a game where you give up a lot of points, a lot of yards, because basically you're giving up yards between the 20s, but when the time comes to get the stop, you get the stop and you keep them out of the end zone. And that's what wins the game. What happens on the scoreboard is where you really want to pay attention, and the final score says you won by 21 because you're able to hold them up and you're able to kind of wear them down. And I I shudder to say this about another NFL team, but maybe kind of break their will a little bit in that fourth quarter where the Saints were able to put up the points, the yards, stay off the field on defense, and those kinds of things. Those kinds of things really add up in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, the Saints took the early lead, and it kind of felt like the Browns were just chasing them the entire game. And even though they were able to tie it up, I still felt like the Saints were dominating, even though the yardage, as you said, didn't tell that story. Their turnovers, Cleveland had 2 takeaways for the first time in 4 games. And it was really interesting the way the team stayed together and continued to fight. And what we saw from the defense was what we've been seeing early in the year, where, yeah, they might allow some yards, but they really locked in when it mattered in those situational moments. And then, again, it's the missed field goals. I don't know what's happening.
Hey, that's Rizzy Magic. He's the special teams coordinator still, I guess, as he rises to interim head coach. And that was his specialty was, being over the special teams. I don't know. Teams are just missing field goals. I mean, because generally, especially long field goals this season in the NFL, the percentages have been high. And the last couple of weeks, the Saints, who have had buzzards luck in a decent amount of games this season, have had the luck fall on their side. And it really has mattered, especially mattered in the Falcons game where, 3 missed field goals and you win by a field goal. Mm-hmm. That you can tangibly look at the scoreboard and say, there but for a couple of made field goals, the thing goes the other way and everybody's not feeling so good. But yesterday, the Saints, Cleveland missed a couple of field goals, but the Saints did a lot of things good. They stopped the run, 66 yards on 20 carries. And then they were able to play better in the red zone. I think Cleveland was 1 for 3 in the red zone. So those things add up. They just, when you're able to hold the fort and force the field, and you got to get credit for forcing them to have to kick the field goal. Yeah. Because it's still an operation where, if one thing goes wrong in that operation, a team can miss a field goal, and the Cleveland missed 2. So, those things, you force them to take the field goal because you keep them out of the end zone, and those things really work in your favor. The more plays that you force a team to run, the better your opportunities are to get a stop and to keep them off the scoreboard.
One of those missed field goals was a 51-yarder, but it was Brian Brzee who had a sack prior that put them, deep into field goal range, and I think was the factor as to why they ended up missing it. I mean, it went just left. Obviously, he missed one closer later in the game, but moments like that where, the defensive line, they had 3 sacks the week prior. They have 3 sacks again this Sunday against the Browns. You can see, I don't know if they're playing different, but it seems like the defensive line is playing at a higher level.
Well, they seem pretty energized. Cam Jordan is back in a heavier rotation, and we know he was sporadically used in the first 9 games or so. And these last couple of games, he's been heavier in the rotation. But these guys seem to be playing well together. They're playing their assignments better, and they're able to play off one another better. It has helped that they hadn't played 2 especially mobile quarterbacks in Kirk Cousins and Jameis Winston. So you have a better idea where the guy's going to be, even though, Winston, escaped a couple of times. And in fact, on his touchdown throw, he rolled out and, got away from pressure. But you hadn't had 2 guys who you feel like might bust a 20-yard run. Mm-hmm. And so that helps some also. But a lot of it has just been these guys have been relentless. They've got a really good rotation. They're deep along the defensive line. They've got, Cam Jordan, Carl Granderson, Chase Young, Colin Saunders. You got Nate Shepard. You got Brian Brzee. You got Peyton Turner. So that's 7 guys that I'm probably forgetting somebody, but that's 7 guys that you can put in the rotation in terms of rushing the passer or stopping the run. And you might want to throw Demario Davis in there because he can rush the passer effectively also. So that's really, you're able to keep those guys fresh, put them on the field, and if the opposing offense is running 60 plays or so or whatever it is, you rotate guys in and out, you get a fresh guy on them all the time, and you can be perfect on an offensive line. This is the thing about offensive linemen. I know they hate it, but you love it when you win if you're the opposing team. You can be perfect for 60, 65 snaps, but you can be wrong for 3 snaps, and those are sacks and strip sacks. And so all the good work you did, nobody remembers
Yeah.
because Chase Young got a sack or because Brian Brzee broke through and got a sack. So you can do a lot of good work, and it doesn't add up to anything if you don't win or if a guy gets a couple of wins off you. So, kudos to the defensive line. Those guys seem to be fresher. They seem to have a little pep in their step. They've talked a big game this entire season, and now they're playing a big game these last couple of outings.
Demario Davis came up huge on that 4th and 1 early. I think it was the first drive for the Browns where he stuffed the runner and they didn't convert, and they were at the 50, and that gave the Saints such good field position.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, you look at Cleveland and you say, why are you taking that gamble? On the other hand, you look at it and say they're 2-7. What do they have to lose? So, I mean, it's one of those things where 6 of one, half dozen of the other, and I can see exactly why they wanted to do it because you try to seize the momentum, and the way the Saints have been playing run defense. Why wouldn't you think you can get it, with a run? But Demario Davis and the defense, they came up big in that one, and then you change not just the field position, but you immediately snatch the momentum. And a 4th down stop is, to me, the equivalent of a turnover because you get the ball in prime field position, and now you take the momentum and you go down and score a touchdown, and now everybody's kind of exhaling like, you know what, this could be one of those days where the Saints can really get on a run because they got that early stop. So now the defense is feeling good about itself. The offense feels good because it went down and scored a touchdown. The dome feels good because you see the Saints, you see the home team take a lead. And so everything seems to be snowballing in your direction.
Yeah, it was a really good start to the game, and that was something that, we wanted to do is get out and get on the Browns early and get up to a lead and then continue to hold, execute. 4th downs on the other side, there was one that the Saints went for as well, and Taysom Hill, direct snap, converts it. Not only converts it, he runs it in 30 yards for a touchdown.
Yeah, Taysom Hill, again, he's one of those guys, he's a load. And I think the longer the game goes on, the less people want to tackle him. He's just one of those dudes, because Taysom ain't going to run out of bounds. He's not going to do that. He's not going to ever run and slide. He's not going to protect himself. When he gets it, he's looking to run it and stay in bounds. And if somebody's in front of him, oh, well, that dude's either going to be punished or Taysom's going to be punished, but somebody's going to be punished. And more likely, Taysom's going to fall forward. So when he breaks through, and he's got that straight line speed, he's not necessarily the most elusive guy, but once he gets a seam, he can take it to the house from pretty much anywhere on the field. And he got a seam right there, and he took it to the house. And, I mean, it's always great to see a healthy Taysom Hill because when he's healthy, again, he makes this offense different. I mean, when you're 3rd and 2 and you got Taysom Hill, that's basically 2 downs you have because you're going to run it on 3rd down with him. Yeah. And you run it on 4th down with him if you don't get it on 3rd down. So he gives you that kind of advantage, that kind of mindset where if there's a tough yard to be had, he's going to get it. And you can't replace that. I know, I can imagine when he goes on the field in those situations, the offensive line says, okay, we got this. The receivers say, okay, we got this. Everybody on the Saints side feels like we got this because we've got the guy who can get it.
Yeah, and talking to Colin Saunders earlier in the year, I think it was during training camp, he said he hated seeing Taysom lined up against him because you never know what's going to happen. There is that big unknown. There's so many possibilities. You got to give credit, though, to the Saints offensive line as well because they have been weathering the worst kind of storms with the injuries and Eric McCoy being out. And then again, he does return and goes out late in the game. But Trevor Penning and his growth has been huge for this team. And then Taliese Fuaga and the way he handled himself against Myles Garrett. Garrett had only 2 pressures, which is the lowest that he's had this entire season. Those 2 players have stepped up in big ways this season.
Well, the Saints had really a couple of unknowns at tackle this season on offense. Everybody knows that. You put a rookie in at left tackle who played right tackle in college. You moved the left tackle that you had over to right tackle, Trevor Penning, because he hadn't been effective at left tackle. And you say, okay, we're going to make this work. And those guys, to their credit, their undying credit, they have made it work. Fuaga has been, the dude since the beginning. Now, he learned a lot about the NFL in training camp because Chase Young kind of beat up on him early in training camp and Carl Granderson. But those were great lessons for him. And Trevor Penning, who looked like he struggled in training camp and even in preseason games, but they got into game situations, and you win the first two in blowouts, and a guy gets confidence. And now Trevor Penning, if Trevor Penning gets his hands on you, you're probably going to end up on your back because he's going to pancake somebody. And so he's just been really, really efficient at what they need him to do. Of course, every lineman, not every lineman, but, you pick up penalties along the way. But it's a learning process for him still, because essentially this is Trevor Penning's rookie season. He didn't play a lot his first 2 years. He was hurt. He was at left tackle. He didn't play well. He didn't play a lot. Now you flip him to start him on another side. So it's like you're bringing in a brand new guy, and you got a number one, a first round pick to play right tackle, and you got a first round pick to play left tackle. So now the Saints have to be looking at it like we might be settled at tackle for the next 8-10 years, knock wood, if things work out the way we think they're going to work out. You got to feel really good about what you have, and then you feel good about yourself. And Eric McCoy is still young now. He left the game with a good growing injury. I guess he aggravated a little bit. Coach Rizzi said he should be fine soon. It's not the same thing. But you put him, and then you're talking about Cesar Ruiz at right guard. So for your guys, you have to feel really good about. So you still got to figure out, what's going to happen at left guard, because, Lucas Patrick's been in and out, and he's been injured and those kinds of things. So you still got to kind of figure that out. But for the 5 positions, you got to feel pretty good about if you're the Saints, especially when you come out of the bye week and everybody should be healthy.
Yeah, no, that makes me feel a lot better considering where we were at the beginning of the season with the unknowns and then the injuries over the last stretch. Has been tough to the O-line, but hopefully McCoy is good to go in a couple weeks when we have our next game coming up, because he's definitely a huge piece of this offensive line being successful. When we talk about injuries, we've also talked a lot about the wide receivers and who is going to step up. We found Marquez Valdes-Scantling can be very effective on those deep routes. He hit a shorter route, but still took it long. So he ends up with a 71-yard touchdown. That was pretty impressive for him. I think it was maybe just like a 5-yard throw. It wasn't 5'10".
Maybe 5'10".
Yeah.
I mean, timing is everything. And Marquez Valdes-Scantling was on the street, and nobody was interested. He was on the street for several weeks, and no one was interested. And the Saints were like, hey, we have a fast guy who went down, and we need another fast guy to come in. And he came in, and he practiced for a week, and then he was inactive, and then he was active the next week, and I think he caught a 5-yard pass in his first game against Carolina. And then he comes out and blows the doors off against the Falcons, and then he comes out and blows the doors off early against Cleveland. So it's one of those things where, again, timing is everything. Guy is sitting around. He falls into the perfect situation for him. And now he is one of those guys who, if you're an opposing team, you got to watch him.
Yeah.
You got to think about him. And that's something that the Saints need, is a deep threat to have to be accounted for, because now Taysom Hill becomes even more effective. Alvin Kamara becomes even more effective. No, by the way, the tight ends who had a really nice game on Sunday, they become more effective. Everybody becomes more effective because everybody is doing their part to make the offense better. This is the Riz 111th thing that and the special teams guys used to say it all the time.
Right.
If you interviewed a special teams guy, I don't care who it was after a game, they would always say 111th. And it was like, okay, I get it. But it's a lot more than a cliche. I mean, everybody is bought into it because that's the accountability. And they're saying basically, if everybody does their job, if each of the 11 guys does his job, this should work. And it's not going to work every play, but it should work the majority of the time if everybody does what he's supposed to do. And that's what they've got more than enough of for the last couple of games.
Yeah, I mean, it makes the defense have to sit back a little bit because they don't want Carr to be able to overthrow coverage, and then that does leave more space for some of that intermediate work that we saw a lot with the tight ends. And it was Juwan Johnson who was asked today about a block that he had, and is that 111th the epitome of it? And he's like, no, I mean, yes and no. It's me just doing my job, which is the 111th thing, but it's not me doing any more than I'm supposed to be doing, and that's the whole point. Everybody is supposed to be doing their job on every single play.
Yeah, he didn't now, and he's been modest because it wasn't a devastating block, but he just needed to stay in front of the guy to give Valdes-Scantling an opportunity to get down the sideline. Now, he could have cut it back across the field, and then it's a foot race and all that kind of stuff. But the shortest distance between two places is what? A straight line. And he allowed him to run the straight line down the sideline. And so Juwan Johnson did his job.
Yeah.
It wasn't a pancake, but he stayed in front of the guy. He didn't get him on the ground. He didn't need to. He just needed to force him down the field, keep him on his heels, and allow his teammate to run by. And that's exactly what he did. So, yeah, he was pretty modest about it. And he was even modest about it after the game. He was like, I didn't do anything. Well, yeah, you did.
Yeah.
You paved the way for a 71-yard touchdown, because maybe it would have been a 59-yard gain and he goes out of bounds instead. Instead, it's a touchdown, which really is a huge play in the game, because now the Saints suddenly ripping off chunk plays left and right when they couldn't get a 15-yard play for, the better part of 6-7 weeks. But now, we're talking 60s and 70s and, 30s and, 40s and those kinds of things. It's like, this is what this offense can be, even without your two main speed guys.
Yeah.
Even without, so imagine what, I'm not going to say imagine what, because I don't even want to do that. I'm going to stay with reality. And the reality is, these last couple of weeks, they've been able to rip off chunk plays that they had not been able to do.
Outside of MVS, 3 of the top 4 receivers were all tight ends. MVS was, I think, the leading receiver, but then the next 3 were Taysom Hill, Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau. They've definitely figured out a better way to use the tight ends and get them involved as receivers, which is something that this team needs.
Yeah, because when you have so many people hurt, as the Saints do, then everybody's got to be able to chip in a little bit more. And if you got, like, Alvin Kamara is a fantastic decoy when he's on the field, because on the 71-yard touchdown pass to MVS, Alvin goes in motion right. He draws so much attention that when Derek Carr rolls left and he throws that little underneath pass to Valdez-Scantling, where there might be 5, 6, 7 defenders in Alvin Kamara's vicinity, and MVS, once he catches and turns around, there's no one but the one defender in front of him that Juwan Johnson's got to block. So you're able to get those kinds of plays, but then you get Juwan Johnson, because Juwan Johnson, people, I guess we need to always remind people, he was a receiver in college.
Right. His body, he's got a big body. He looks like he could be a blocker for sure.
But he was a receiver in college, so he's a guy who can get down the field, and he's got pretty good hands. Foster Moreau has shown us that he might have better hands than we thought he did, because he's been able to get downfield and make some pretty acrobatic catches. And Taysom Hill, I know I know the Saints listen to tight end, but I don't know exactly what Taysom is. He's a fullback, he's a halfback, he's a quarterback, he's a tight end, he's a receiver. So on offense, he does everything except play the offensive line, I guess. And in a pinch, he probably could pop out and play one of the tackle positions, maybe. So, call him a tight end, and he caught a career high 8 passes in the game. But it's enough, because I think it might have been 8 passes for 50 yards or something like that. So not a breakaway, but still that's 6 yards to catch. Well, you know what? You make 2 of those, that's the first down. So you move the chains and you make him a weapon, and now you make him as a receiver when he goes out. The defense has to pay attention to him. When he's on the field and Alvin Kamara is on the field, who are you going to double? Because one of those guys probably is worthy of a double. If you try to double both of them, then, that's where Juwan Johnson can hurt you, or Foster Moreau can hurt you, or MVS can get behind you deep or something like that. So, having those guys on the field just means a world of good, and being able to utilize the tight ends in those situations, things open up when you've got the full array of what you have.
Yeah. As far as rushing yards go, 214 on the day, which is a massive amount, and a lot of them obviously because of Taysom Hill. But the average was 7.6 yards per carry, which is, if you can average that with your run game, then you're converting every third down. You don't even get to a third down.
Yeah, and you attribute that, a lot of that. Of course, they go to the 33-yard touchdown run and the 75-yard touchdown run, but they all count.
Yeah.
So when Saquon Barkley runs 65 yards for a touchdown against your defense, it counts. When and another opponent, I can't remember who it was, runs for 200 and had back-to-back opponents, Denver and I can't remember who, account for 500 rushing yards basically. They all count. So we're not going to detract from what Taysom was able to do to get to that 214. It's huge because it loosens up a defense. And look, the Rams have that film, and they are looking at that film saying, we can't let this team run for 214 yards and throw for another 250 or whatever it was to get to, almost 500 yards offense. We've got to be able to keep that imbalance. And if you can keep a team in balance, as we saw yesterday, you might not be able to control the game, but you can be able to kind of keep them out of the end zone. So the Rams are going to be looking at that, saying, can they control the balance? And if the Saints can run it like that, if they can run it half that well, with that kind of efficiency, if you can run for 125 yards and average 4.8 yards a carry, you have pretty much dictated the game. So hopefully that's something they can continue, but it really has a better chance of continuing if Taysom Hill is on the field, because he is that respite for Alvin Kamara.
Yeah.
He's that hammer that when you got to get between the tackles on 3rd and 2, he's a guy who can do that. And Alvin's been doing it, but Taysom's just a big thumper. And I mean, you run him up in there enough, and nobody will ever admit it, but dudes do not want to tackle him the later the game gets. I'm convinced of that because I've seen it enough to where the later the game gets, the more likely it is that he will pop one.
Yeah. I loved what he was saying after the game, too. He's like, I just love playing. Like, I just love football. And he's just having so much fun doing it. He doesn't think about him being the first to do this or that or whatever. He just wants to win and do what he can. And he was down on himself at half because of the 2 turnovers that he had. He had one at the 5-yard fumble and then the interception that he threw. But he more than made up for them and carried the team to a victory. We are now looking to the bye week. So thoughts on how that's going to be handled for the Saints?
Well, they're going to take the rest of this week off. Coach Rizzi said he'll bring them back on Monday. They will have basically a Wednesday practice on Tuesday. They'll have a Thursday practice on Wednesday. He'll give them Thanksgiving Day off. God bless you, Coach Riz. And they won't be at the facility. Then they'll come back on Friday, get ready for the game on Sunday. So you get an opportunity to hopefully get Eric McCoy healthy and back. I don't necessarily know. Pete Werner, his hand should be better. Now, he might still have a club on it, but he should be in a little bit better shape. And all the bumps and bruises that were accumulated over the course of the game against Cleveland, hopefully you can heal up some of those. I think Alvin Kamara was a little bumped and bruised in that one also. And so you'll see what happens. Of course, maybe. Well, no, you won't get Chris Olave back. You will not have him back. But still, maybe you get Jamal Williams back at running back. So you get some guys back, or you think you should be able to get some guys back over the course of that time. So hopefully you heal up a little bit more. And even if you don't get those guys back, the guys you do have, they get healthier because they're able to get off their feet, they're able to get a little rehab in, and they're able to rest up and hopefully keep their minds sharp because you're 4-7. You don't get too happy on the farm. You're 4-7. Yeah. But you're only 2 games out of first place.
The Falcons are falconing. They are plummeting down the ranks.
And so it's basically Juwan Johnson said put on the blinders like a horse, because at the end of the day, you always have to handle your own business, because now the Saints are in a position where they're going to need some outside help, yes, but the outside help doesn't mean anything if you don't win your games. So you got to win your games to make the outside help work. So just win your games and don't worry about what the Falcons are doing. Don't worry about what Tampa Bay is doing. Don't worry about what anybody's doing. Just win yours. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's been fun these past 2 weeks. We have the bye and then the Rams coming up after that, and we'll be home. So this is a really good stretch here where we've had 2 home games, the bye, and then another home game. So resting up and hopefully heading into the last stretch of this season will be key for the Saints. And we'll have one more podcast on Wednesday before we take a Friday long weekend with the bye and everything like that. So, JD, thank you.
Who's doing the podcast? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. Great times. The dome sounded like the dome is supposed to sound when the Saints play, and that's a great feeling for the players and for the city. So hopefully they can keep this thing rolling.
Definitely.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Saints podcast. Join us 3 times per week on NewOrleansSaints.com, the Saints mobile app, or you can download the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Saints Podcast.